Hello everybody, I hope you're having a wonderful day, and today I would like to share with you guys my thoughts on this very old Kunwu model. This is the X-TAO. This particular variation, along with a couple other units, were entrusted to me by a wonderful friend of mine in the community, Work Knife Balance. If you haven't checked out his channel, go ahead, subscribe. He does some stuff on Instagram as well, other media platforms, I'm sure. I personally just have Instagram, so that's all I know at the moment. But he let me borrow a handful of Kunwu models that I've never checked out before, that I've always longed to check out, and I am very grateful for him in doing so. To return the favor, I've absolutely babied these. These did not leave the house. They did see some cardboard destruction and basic, testing. These are knives. They're meant to be used, not abused. They're also not my knives, so I didn't use them as hard. That's why I'm gonna call this and refer to videos like this as product spotlights or model spotlight videos, because I am not the owner of this, so the way that I go about my testing is a little bit different, and I would say is maybe a little bit unfair in comparison to something else that I own, and I'm gonna be a whole lot harsher with because I spent my own money on it. Regardless, besides all that kind of stuff, we're still going to take the weight. We're going to talk about the build, but I also want to add a segment and talking about what this could be in the future if Kunwu Knives decided to continue production on this. This is a discontinued model. It's been discontinued now for, I believe, maybe about a year now. Again, this was a very, very old particular unit. This one is actually numbered, which is quite special. First production, this is unit 114 out of 400, so that's pretty cool. We'll talk about all the stuff on this side of the blade in a sec, but let's start off by taking the weight. The price when these were available, or at least the last time that these were available, was I believe $209 or $210, somewhere around there. For what I feel, for what I see, I think for that time period, this made sense, and this was honestly quite a steal, honestly, for that time period that this came about, which was maybe 2 years ago when they first started this. 5.3, it's definitely on the hefty side for sure. You can definitely feel that this thing overall feels like a relatively dense in-hand product. It is most definitely very butt heavy. The balance is, you would want it to be here in the primary finger dip or choil, whatever you're gonna call it, or up there, but it's honestly, the balance is like further back over here, if that's something that you guys care about. Also, hardware on this, the pivot is T8, T6 for damn near everything else, which not the biggest fan about, but this was of course a different time in Kunwu's history. One cool thing is that right off the bat, they started working with really cool blade materials that we only really saw on more higher end boutique brands that, did like limited runs or editions and things like that. This is LMAX. I did sharpen this along with a couple other knives that Work Knife Balance sent my way just to return the favor. I figured that he used these things and loved them so much that he completely just obliterated the blade. There weren't any major chips or rolls. They were just, the edge was just gone. Like, that's how much he used it, which is a testament to how amazing this thing was and how much he actually enjoyed using this. And rightfully so. This is a wonderful blade shape. It is a standard drop point, very straight on the spine. It's quite reminiscent to what would be a straight back, but it has a tiniest drop, so you can still get a lot of utilitarian use out of this. But in relation to the pivot, yeah, the tip is a little bit on the higher side. Good bit of belly, about like 2.5 inches of flat here, which is nice. The actual choke up and using it in hand, it feels quite good as well. You could be back here, it's comfortable, it's nice and chamfered here on that side, and the flat resting up there, I don't feel sketchy at all with that sharpened edge right there being pretty close to me. This area is nice and wide. I get a good purchase. Taking a look at the spine here, it is flat, it's not contoured, there's no jimping, nothing fancy like that. Would have been nice if there was, but again, a different time in their early production. At the end of this, I'm going to talk about all the things that could definitely be done that I know now, and that we all know and expect Kunwu to be able to do certain things now. And that they have these rather interesting looking studs that are definitely function first and I guess visually appealing second, in my opinion. They are different in comparison to most traditional thumb studs, you know, round, but they work. Functionally speaking, it's freaking great. Talking about something that's function first and aesthetics later is the wire pocket clip. Now, I believe on this model, as well as the majority of Kunwu's model, they offer milled titanium clips that are excellent in and out of the pocket, but preferably on models with smooth or the eggshell texturing, maybe not so much the diamond tie or the diamond texturing variations, because it is a little aggressive in and out of your pocket. But the way that these wire pocket clips are formed, super round, no hot spot, no nothing, it's just freaking great in and out of the pocket. And because it does have a crossbar style lock, you can flip it over, so this is 100% ambidextrous model here, which is quite nice. Taking a look at the crossbar itself, it is of standard thickness. It's nothing super robust or impressive, so it's nice that they're sticking with, you know, the industry standards for that. There is a stop pin right there. There are some designs that utilize the crossbar lock as the stop pin, but it's kind of like there's 2 points of contact, so it would make this quite sturdy. But again, this is an older unit. This has been well used, probably flicked a bajillion times. With this particular unit, there is a tiniest bit of up and down, but I don't see this thing failing in general day-to-day use. Of course, this is not a fixed blade. You want to treat it as a folding knife, but it is still quite sturdy. Side to side, 0. And what's incredible is that this does have bearings within the pivot, but being that is so, I had to crank the pivot down so tight to make sure that there was no side to side movement. It's freaking beautiful on the action. Another thing too that I went ahead and did for work knife balance is I actually, so besides sharpening it, I believe I put like I think like a 17 or 18 degree edge on there. It is definitely hair popping sharp now. I was ready to go back to work. I also put in some fresh Omega springs, ones that I would consider to be just the tiniest bit higher tension. Is nothing too crazy. Of course, cleaned everything out, tuned it, so this thing is brand spanking new, ready to go back and be loved again, which is really cool. Let's do some size comparisons. I know that's something I would have done a little bit earlier, but I just got carried away and I got excited about talking about the model. Let's start with some larger ones. So this is a Spyderco Manix 2. You can see that the Kunwu model is just the tiniest bit longer overall, but not by much. Beneath it, we have the enormous MSI. So the MSI dwarfs majority of things that I check out. I don't, I think I've only ever had maybe like one thing that was bigger than the MSI. Oh, not that one yet, not that one yet. Let's do mediums. This is a Civivi Vision FG. I can't tell you guys how often I see a Vision FG on Blade Binge and I want to pick up a secondary one with like black blade and black hardware, everything else. It's such a good knife, but that would be a complete impulse buy. I got the one, that's all I need. It's just such a great knife. And then above it is the CMB Made Knives Predator. These guys are just the tiniest bit shorter than the Kunwu model here. Last two, definitely not least, the wonderful Native 5 by Spyderco. This is a lightweight variation. And the FT2103 Free Tiger budget knife that is quite similar to the overall length of a Benchmade bug out. So hopefully these 6 knives give you a good visual representation of the size of this. I think there might have also been a compact version or slightly shorter version of that, but I'm not gonna get into all that because we're talking about this one, right? So I already talked about hardware, just a couple little details about it that I do definitely enjoy. Now I want to move into the segment where I talk about if this is something, a design that's going to be revisited. Knowing what Kunwu can do now, I think they can definitely revamp or do like a version 2 or something. Starting off with the blade, this is something that is very, very important to me and should be to you as well if you actually use and sharpen your knives and care how they look in the long run. So if you want to get the most amount of performance out of any pocket knife, chances are when you sharpen it, you're going to want to lay back the angle and make it a little bit thinner behind the edge, and it's going to perform a little bit more. Yes, depending on the blade material itself, it could be more susceptible to chipping and rolling a little bit easier, but again, use your knives wisely. You know, you're not going to be chopping bricks in half, so you don't need a super robust edge. That's not what this is for. So I went ahead and laid the angle back to, I believe it was like 18 or 17 degrees, which is significantly more acute than what it was for the factory. I don't remember what it was off the top of my head. I just remember it was kind of beefy. It was kind of thick. And on top of having a very thick geometry behind the edge, you could see how wide that is right there, right in front of my nail. And how thick the stock thickness is on this. This is thicker than average. A lot of people would consider that to be a charming aspect or something that they like. To each their own, of course, but for me personally, I think that this model would most definitely benefit from having blade stock thickness that was a whole lot thinner, a crowned, semi-crowned spine with some light jimping that definitely goes up at least an inch out. I think that'd be quite nice, especially because they offer the very, very roomy space right here to choke up if you wanted to. Everything else about the handle, I mean, I really don't have anything against it. The milling, the flat, the extra texturing is wonderful. The wire pocket clip, I don't care about that kind of stuff. It's great the way that it is. And definitely going back to the blade, thin out, push the sharpening choil further back, because while I have been sharpening for many years now, an issue that I've always run into is knives that don't have the best design or execution of a sharpening choil. You can see that it'll widen up, create the tiniest smile back here. That will eventually get worse with time. It's very difficult to avoid that without dremeling your own sharpening choil notch. And that's something that I didn't want to do and didn't feel comfortable doing, because this isn't my knife. If this was, and I was going to be beating this thing around and just using it as a daily driver, then yeah, that's something that I would probably do. If this was my particular knife, I would actually add in a sharpening choil there. And you definitely could, because that area doesn't get contacted at all in the open or closed position. So if you were to put in your own sharpening choil there, it wouldn't affect the the close and open stability of the knife when it's in or without use. Another thing too, I would definitely reshape the blade just the tiniest bit. It would help in a couple different things. It would lower the tip just the tiniest bit, but also help to seat that tip just a little bit further down. As you could see, it's right there. And if I push my finger in just the tiniest bit, I could actually feel that tip snagging the tiniest bit. That is a safety concern. If you are a fan of knives and fan of using knives and you're constantly taking it in and out of your pocket, that's something that kind of sketches me out. I am more afraid or concerned about poking myself with a closed tip while I go to put my hand in my pocket. While it's very rare that it'll happen, but I am more concerned about that than actually cutting myself while the blade is open and deployed. That's just me, to each their own, but that's something that does concern me. And again, slightly tweaking the blade shape and canting the tip just the tiniest bit down will help in utilitarian use and cuts. You can still keep the general aesthetic of a beautiful utilitarian drop point and make this thing a whole lot safer. And last but most definitely not least, change all the hardware to T8s. That's something that we know that Kunwu has moved forward with, doing all T8s, so they can definitely do that. When it comes to the access lock, I did put the fresh springs in here. It's still honestly really light, and that's just because of their fit and finish and how things are shaped with how the blade and interactions with it. I would definitely suggest having some weight relieving within the scales because this thing is very dense. It is very heavy for what it is and its overall length. This is a beefy feeling knife, but I think that this would be a little bit more attractive and a little bit more favored by the community if it was just thinned out and sculpted out a whole lot from what it is currently. I would also suggest moving forward with something that has been quite popularized recently in a lot of different models from different companies all across the board, where you can adjust your detent. So the first thing that comes to mind would be the Kaiser clutch lock. The Kaiser clutch lock has 5 different holes. I believe the 5-hole thing possibly is a patent, but no one's done 2 holes. Kubi, they do 3 holes actually, and there are a couple other manufacturers out there as well where they allow for adjustment. One that is, quick reach right here, the CMB Made Knives Predator, they have 3 holes, and the holes are pushed way further away from everything else. And truth be told, I keep this one on the middle setting, even though I've known to be very picky and I complain about the strength of Omega springs. You can definitely allow for more variety and comfortability for your customers if you give them the option to adjust for their springs. I personally have owned the full-size Chad, the compact Chad, and those were 2 opportunities for them to do the multiple holes for adjustment, and they just didn't. So they honestly just neglected that, ignored it, and just didn't really care. They're tiny little holes. It would take them 0 time to implement that into their new designs. And if they were to move forward and I guess revamp or refresh this thing, I think that this thing would be an absolute hit. If you guys want to keep, as if I'm talking to Kunwu themselves or Sergio if he sees this, I definitely do enjoy their design language for sure, but honestly, if they were to continue making stuff with their crossbar lock and they want to use their realistically weaker than the standard, within what's typically known nowadays. Obviously, Benchmade is the one that started with all the crossbar locks and Omega springs and things like that. Even with me putting fresh Omega springs in here and cleaning it, tuning it, doing the best that I can with it, it's still very light. And honestly, this is quite a similar experience to what I had in my Chad and my compact Chad. And while some people don't mind it, I definitely would suggest that allowing your customers to have a little bit more variation in the wonderful units that these are, I think that would just be a no-brainer. So that's definitely something that I would suggest for, I guess, a future edition of this. So just thinning everything out, skeletonizing the internals to make it a little bit more balanced. The wire pocket clip, it's freaking perfection. The studs, they're awesome. Definitely thin out and push back that sharpening choil. Allow for adjustability with the crossbar lock, and that is really about it. And I'd say that this thing would be, and also lowering the tip. That's another thing too. Again, a safety concern, and that's really what I'm going to harp on right there, is that I would consider that to be a safety concern because the tip is literally right there. So that's something to definitely consider, that's for sure. So if I ever had an opportunity to speak with Kunwu themselves, it's probably never going to happen, and they're probably never going to watch this, which is fine. But I'm just sharing with you guys my thoughts on this particular model. For the time that this thing came out, I'm sure this thing was an absolute banger. Nowadays, this industry evolves so ridiculously fast. This thing would not fly with today's standards. So I know a lot of other people would complain about similar things as well as I do, because I'm a very picky individual and I don't typically let a lot of things slide because shit's expensive. These knives are beautifully made, well executed, and they typically use premium materials. So from a consumer standpoint, if I were to have spent my money on something like this today, I would most definitely return it. It just wouldn't be something that I would be super content with. if I bought this around the time where it came out, maybe 2 years ago or so, I'd probably be really happy with it, and I wouldn't really care too much about the little nitpicky things. But the way that this industry moves, it's extremely fast. It's pretty ridiculous, honestly. But it's just pushing innovation, design, and talking about design, fit and finish, just the lockup, solidity, different offerings of materials, finishes, if I didn't mention that already, and just variability. People love customability. So that's definitely something that I would suggest moving forward with this particular model. But that's pretty much it. So that's my product spotlight on the Kunwu Knives X-TAO. Again, this is a discontinued model. I really hope that they come back around with this in a new variation, giving it the sauce that they give to all their new stuff. I have actually ordered just a couple days ago a compact padre. It's basically the same thing as what I owned before, the reverse tux with DLC. I believe the blade material was Vanix. I think it was Vanix, possibly, or it might have been Elmex. I can't remember what it was, but I absolutely regret selling my full-size padre, but I needed the money at that point. Now that I'm a whole lot more financially stable, now that a lot of other things have passed, I went ahead and placed an order for a compact padre, and I'm very excited for it. So I absolutely love Kunwu and a lot of the stuff that they do. I love their design language, but I would definitely suggest that, while they do have a wonderful platform here, there are plenty of things they can do to absolutely improve this thing and make it something that a lot of other companies can look at for inspiration. Absolutely. So that's pretty much it. If you guys like this video, go ahead and leave a like down below. If you are subscribed, thank you so much. I appreciate all your support and your patience, of course. If you are not subscribed, please consider subscribing, because I have plenty more videos and content coming you guys this way. And with that being said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.